Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Enactus Canada Regional Exposition. My name is Paula Worthington, and on behalf of Enactus Canada, I want to thank you for tuning in today. I am a proud graduate of the University of Calgary, where I participated on the Enactus team. I also worked for the Enactus head office in Toronto. Today, I'm an entrepreneur and founder and principal of Worthington PR and Story, a communications agency based in Calgary. But enough about me. Let's move on to the fun stuff. It's with great pleasure that I'd like to welcome everyone back to the Enactus Alumni Spotlight Series, proudly presented by RBC Foundation in support of RBC Future Launch. Over the past week, I've had the pleasure of chatting with three of Western Canada's inspiring Enactus alumni. We're going to kick things off with Andrew Chow. You may be familiar with one of the companies he co-founded called Skip the Dishes. He has now launched his second business, Neo Financial, where he is the CEO. But before all this incredible success, he was a member of the Enactus team at the University of Saskatchewan. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Andrew. Well, hi, Andrew. It's great to see you today.
Great to be here, Paula.
Now, you have had a great story of entrepreneurship and success, but before we get to that, maybe tell us a little bit of the story about some of the jobs you maybe had in university, or did you have jobs after you graduated before you started your business?
Yeah, so I mean, when I was, during university, I had a whole host of random things. I originally, I'm from Saskatoon, was born and raised there. I was also born and raised essentially in a restaurant where my parents owned a little shop. So that was sort of my first foray into entrepreneurship. I pretty much was in the back, probably causing more of a menace than actually helping. But that was sort of my first experience of entrepreneurship. During high school, pretty much worked at the restaurant for pretty much my entire life. But my first real jobs in university were really just some internships at a real estate company. And then, to be honest, I actually spent more time in extracurriculars than I did actually working in university.
Perfect. And at what point did you know that you wanted to become an entrepreneur?
I think, having been around, my parents who were entrepreneurs and had sort of paved their own way here in Canada, I had always known I wanted to have some aspect of entrepreneurship. I mean, even when I was 13, I had started, my own web hosting company and had a bunch of different pieces on the go when I was younger. So I always knew I wanted to get into entrepreneurship. I just didn't really necessarily know how to. And even aspects in university with Enactus and the programs I was involved in and started and really promoting entrepreneurship to younger students, which was a part of what we were doing. That was sort of, again, scratching part of my itch in a way. And then, of course, it evolved to eventually making the leap from corporate to entrepreneurship a couple of years down the road.
Perfect. So tell us a little bit the story about your business, which I'm sure is one that almost everyone watching is probably very familiar with, particularly in the past year.
Yeah, I mean, so there's right now we're on my second business, but sort of our first business, which is Skip the Dishes, and we really started out a bit different than where it looks like today, right? I mean, we started out with 5 co-founders. Well, originally 2 co-founders, one of which was one of my former classmates, who also went to the University of Saskatchewan. And we had always moved away. So we moved away from Saskatchewan. I was living in Toronto. He was living in London. A lot of our other co-founders were out and about in larger metros. And we had seen all these large tech companies coming into the bigger cities in the US and abroad, but really skipping over Canada and skipping over Western Canada as a market. So it was really around taking one of those ideas, which, food delivery, which was, starting to grow in these other larger markets, and really bringing that to the masses here in Canada. And that was really the genesis of Skip back in 2011, 2012. And from there, it was really just a matter of, growing the company, month over month, city after city, and scaling that to, where it is today, fast forward 8 years later, where Skip the Dishes does, I think just over 3 billion in sales, with over 3,000 employees across the country, and powers many other countries, in the UK, in Italy, in France, and the delivery logistics as well. So it's been quite a journey from that sense. And I think one of the main pieces is that, after doing Skip the Dishes, we actually left about a year and a half ago, or myself, and started a new company called Neo Financial. So it's which I can get into, but that's sort of the Skip story, and having built a company, now we're sort of building another one as we speak.
Amazing. Well, congratulations on your success. That is unbelievable. Some people say that the hardest thing as an entrepreneur is starting the business. And I often argue that one of the hardest things is growing the business, whether it's growth you're trying to achieve or growth that maybe catches you by surprise. So can you talk a little bit about that in your own experience?
Yeah, I mean, growing, it's absolutely the hardest. I would actually say that the hardest part is actually making that leap at the very, very beginning. I think it's making that transition. If you are in corporate or in school or whatever it is, everyone just wants to get it absolutely right the first time, right? But I find that it's actually just making that leap into entrepreneurship, or saying we're going to do something and we'll just figure it out along the way. And with the growth side of things, then yeah, it absolutely is hard. And I think that's where you can, continue to iterate and find ways to grow. And even when we use, the Neo Financial example, I mean, we spent the last 18 months really just building our product and our technology, because we're essentially building a new challenger bank in Canada. And to do that, it takes a lot of patience, and a lot of development and R&D to actually stand that up. So we're sort of at this pivotal moment where growth is now we actually can grow, because we've sort of launched our product. But in those first 18 months, there wasn't really any growth from that sense, because we're really just building the technology to help support that.
So when you look back at your days and being involved with Enactus at the University of Saskatchewan, were there things you did or learned through that experience that helped you plant the seeds to take that leap?
Yeah, Enactus was, a really interesting and challenging, group that I was a part of in university. I think a lot of the things that I learned by being a part of it, whether it was, running programs from end to end, whether it was launching new entrepreneurship programs, whether it was even just doing regionals or national expos. I mean, that exposure to starting something from scratch, that exposure to time pressure, that exposure to presenting in front of thousands of people in an audience. I mean, those are things that you have to do when you're running your own company, when you're in entrepreneurship, or even in the corporate life too. And I think those are the types of skills that you don't necessarily get day to day in the classroom or at home or whatever it might, or even in the workplace. So being exposed to those things early on really helped accelerate those things. And I remember, even when it's as simple as, doing an event or launching an event, and you're trying to get, at least 200 attendees, you're trying to fundraise for a certain charity, and you're trying to, coordinate the logistics of all of these pieces. I mean, that's essentially what you do when you're, running your own company or in entrepreneurship too. So it's very, very similar to that, except, and I would say actually sometimes it's even harder because you're not paying anyone either. Everyone's volunteer. So that's always the challenge in itself.
Agreed. Tell us a little bit about the second business that you've now started.
Yeah, so after doing Skip the Dishes, I mean, it's growing, and it's growing even more than ever today, given the current events. We really saw an opportunity, or we really saw the fact that you can absolutely build massive businesses here in Canada. Time and time again, we were going to investors, for example, with Skip the Dishes. We saw investors said, we don't believe you can build a multi-billion-dollar company in Canada only. And now that we were able to do that, we were saying, well, why don't we take a lot of our experience of building a consumer technology brand and apply that in an industry that hasn't really been innovated in a few hundred years, which is really the banking industry. So with Neo Financial, which is our new company, what we're really building is a new challenger to the banks today. The big five banks own about 90% market share, which is really unheard of in any other country. So we're really just taking a new innovative approach and launching with more innovative banking products, from a credit card to a credit card that earns you rewards from thousands of different places, all the way to a bank account with no fees and can earn you 30 times more interest than any other bank out there. So it's really around combining and leveraging technology, because in our phones and all the latest and greatest, and leading with that, so the experience feels more like a tech company rather than a bank.
Well, that's really exciting. We're excited to hear more. What would be one piece of advice that you would give to an Enactus student who's just starting their journey, just like you did back at the University of Saskatchewan?
The one piece of advice, or I'd say maybe 1.5 or 2, I'd say the first is, meet and get involved as much as you possibly can in university, because it's really the only environment where you have absolutely zero risk of getting it wrong. I think the main thing that you can do not wrong, but it is not get involved enough or meet enough people, because at the end of the day, that's really what university is for, is to be connected with people with different perspectives, different backgrounds, and just to really open up your horizons. And then the second would be, just go and do it. Whatever you want to do, just go and do it. Again, there's no real downside of doing something, whether it is making a leap from corporate to entrepreneurship, whether it's making a leap to take that internship or making a leap to join a club. There's really no downside of doing that.
Now, we would like to shift gears a little bit. After hearing a story about a career in business startups, let's talk to someone who has found success stepping into a corporate role with one of Canada's largest companies. Jamie Burling is an assistant manager at Scotiabank, but before that, she held many roles within the Enactus team at the University of Saskatchewan, including president. Let's check out my conversation with Jamie Burling. So we're here today with Jamie Burling. Hi, Jamie.
Hi.
Fantastic. So you're based in Calgary, but you're a graduate from the University of Saskatchewan. So maybe take us back and tell us a little bit about what you studied at the University of Saskatchewan and some of the highlights of your time with Enactus there.
Yeah, for sure. So I think going back to university, it was kind of a whole big picture experience. I started out in biotechnology and ended up transferring into economics. And went and took a degree in business economics. In my second last year, I was introduced to Enactus, and I got involved as a project leader. Following that and doing presentation team and all that fun stuff, I ended up as the president of the U of S team and had, the time of my life, really. Made so many great friendships, both like amongst the team, other teams, Enactus Canada staff, and now I'm in Calgary. I ended up here, all thanks to Enactus.
Fantastic. And now you're an assistant manager with Scotiabank, and that relationship sort of developed as you were still in university, right?
Yeah, it really did. I was sort of, I like to say, coerced into taking an interview with Scotiabank while I was at a regional competition, and I really didn't feel like I had the time. I really didn't feel like I was prepared. I actually showed up to the interview like 5 minutes late because my team was presenting, and found out that it was going to be a really great fit for me. So they gave me the opportunity to kind of work wherever I wanted in Canada, and I picked Calgary, and I'm so happy with my decision. Love the city, but also really like working for Scotiabank. I've worked through a variety of different positions. So I was hired as a manager of customer service, and then I ended up taking a few different lateral moves before ending up where I'm at today as an assistant manager.
That's fantastic. And obviously we wouldn't recommend you're ever 5 minutes late for an interview, but you must have really wowed them after that. So well done. Now, if you look back at your Enactus experience, what are some of the things maybe you did as a student with your time with Enactus that maybe helped you, land that job, even if you were a few minutes late for the interview? What were some of the things or highlights that come to mind that really helped you be able to start a career with Scotiabank?
I think the biggest thing for me was definitely learning how to network. So networking with professionals within the community. And I really took advantage of networking with other Enactus students, especially across Western Canada. We had such a great group of leaders that I met through the leadership retreat that I was able to stay in touch with. And having that sense of support and that network that I had developed really helped me in my career today know that I need that, know that I need to build this network, know kind of how I need to go about it, and not being afraid to ask for help. So that's definitely one of the biggest things that I've taken with me.
When we look back to your Enactus experience, is there a specific project or a challenging project or something that you worked on that really stands out to you as a highlight moment?
I think the most challenging things were always the interpersonal part of being a leader, especially a leader amongst your peers. And it all stands out to me as being so worthwhile. A lot of times pushing myself to have, conversations with other people that I can look back and I can say, I'm very pleased with how I handled that, or, something that maybe I wasn't pleased with that I learned a lot from and could take away from. I think challenging myself there, and I had a lot of support from my advisory board in that sense, and to push me outside of my comfort zone. And those are definitely, looking back, some highlights that I still can think about today.
Well, that's good. And, there's always opportunity to go back if you do want to do that. If we look at, your current job at Scotiabank, and people may have an idea on what it's like to work for a big bank, but what are a couple of things that may surprise people to know about what Scotiabank is like?
It's actually a really small community. So it does seem like a huge organization where things get lost and you get shuffled around. And that was definitely my first impression of working for a large organization. I wanted to work somewhere small where I felt like my boss and the people around me knew me and had my best interest at heart, wanted to push me and wanted to help me to develop and become a better leader. And I really found that can be found anywhere. I definitely found it within Scotiabank. I have my network of supporters that I've built up around me, and we have, small pockets within the larger organization where you can develop your skills as a leader. You can get what you want as long as you ask for it and put in the effort that's needed.
What's one piece of advice that you would give to an Enactus student today?
Oh, I think that the most important part is to not worry about the mistakes. There's going to be small mistakes or big mistakes, but you learn from them, you grow from them, or grow again. But definitely just, lean into the experience. Don't be afraid to make that mistake. It's all so worthwhile. It's so valuable in your development, as whether it's an entrepreneur or you as a leader. Lean in and don't be afraid.
Perfect. That's great advice. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Starting a business or working for a company are often seen as the two main options as career paths after school. But my next conversation is with someone who chose a different path, public service. Acacia Pangelinen is the executive director at the Kamloops Chamber of Commerce. Before taking on this role in the world of advocacy and economic development, Acacia was the president of the team at Thompson Rivers University. So last but not least, here's my conversation with Acacia. Hi, Acacia. It's nice to see you today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for being here. You have a pretty amazing story, and I can't wait to get into it. But maybe let's go back and talk to us about which school you went to and where you participated in Enactus, and a little bit about your story there.
Absolutely. So I am from Kamloops, BC, which is in the interior of British Columbia. And I went to Thompson Rivers University, which is a university in Kamloops. And I studied business with a focus in HR and public relations. And at my time at Thompson Rivers University, I was in a number of different roles with the SIFE, then Enactus team. So I served as the Vice President of Program Development, of Business Development, and then I actually served for President of the organization for 2 years.
And what's maybe a highlight or a project that really stands out to you as something that you're really proud of?
Well, we did lots of amazing work with really great organizations in the community, and I definitely don't want to take away from that. But my absolute favorite moment of my Enactus history was when SIFE had changed the name to Enactus. We were at the Calgary competition, and our team wanted to have a mascot come forward in the opening ceremonies to really pump everybody up. And so we went to a costume shop in Calgary. I found a cactus costume, and my big team of over 20 people rolled up to opening ceremonies, and I was the original Enactus cactus. And so that was hilarious. I think it started a bit of a trend. I know Okanagan College had a cactus too at the same point. I think I beat her in a dance off. It was pretty awesome. But then hilariously enough, that year I received a bursary from Enactus Canada, and I had to go onto the stage wearing my cactus costume. And so I think there's a photo of me. I tried to just keep my hands up like a cactus, but by far one of the funniest memories I have of my time at Enactus.
Some true spirit there, and you probably don't look at a cactus the same way again since then.
Absolutely not. And I live in a semi-arid desert, so there's a lot of cacti around.
There you go. So today you're now the executive director of the Kamloops Chamber of Commerce. So tell me a little bit about your role there today, and maybe what led you towards that specific role.
So while I was in Enactus, the sales and marketing manager with the Kamloops Chamber was the chair of our business advisory board, and she was also a SIFE alumni. She had done a really good job of getting the chamber connected to the university, and so she developed the relationship with our team to provide that mentorship to our club, which was fantastic. It also allowed us to grow our network into the business community. And so while we were students, I was taking our executive teams to networking events in the business community so they could grow their network, meet other people. And that was sometimes for program development, sometimes it was for business development or sponsorship. Other times it was for them to make those really great contacts and connections for career opportunities or job placement. So that my connection with the chamber has been, for a few years prior to me even working there. Then after school, I started working for our member of parliament for Kamloops Thompson Caribou, and had a really great experience working for the federal government and helping constituents. But an opportunity came up at the chamber to do a 1-year maternity leave cover running all of their events. And I thought, well, I love the chamber, I love my community. It's 1 year, I'll try it out and see what happens. And sure enough, 1 year turned into 5. And now I've moved up through the organization, and I'm now the executive director, which I became the executive director in May of 2019.
Well, congratulations. That's a huge accomplishment within a relatively short time frame. Looking at your experience and looking at your journey, volunteerism has really played a big part in that. And maybe can you talk a little bit about how specifically what you gained through your volunteer time has helped you become an executive director this quickly in your career?
So the volunteerism, I have to say, really develops your soft skills and your team skills. And when organizations are looking for leadership, they're looking for actual experience. They're looking for examples that people have that can show or prove their type of leadership ability and qualities. And through volunteerism, I was really able to learn how to be empathetic and to understand. I learned how to give back to the people around me because it was important and it fulfilled needs in my community. I personally get a sense of fulfillment when I help others around me. I'm classified a helper. I think everyone who knows me would know that. And so it's always been incredibly important to me, even prior to being in Enactus. But it also, I learned how to work on a variety of different projects with different people. So learning how to collaborate, learning how to work towards common goals, and even that component of networking and getting yourself out there in a community like Kamloops, just over 100,000 people. You never know where you're going to run into people again. And so those volunteer opportunities were critical for me to develop who I am as a leader, that showed the board at the chamber that I had the potential to do this job. When I received the job, I was one of the youngest in the entire chamber network to become an executive director.
Congratulations. That's a huge feat. And you're right. Building that network and making those connections, you never know, who might have a job lead for you, or, I know in my own case, there's people that I met 20 years ago that I'm still really well connected with in my career. So that's really valuable. Now, the past year, just like the rest of us, has been a pretty wild time. Obviously, working with both small and large businesses in Kamloops, I'm sure you've seen, great successes and great challenges for the business community. What's it been like for you specifically, living and working through this pandemic over the past year?
It has been crazy. It's been crazy for everybody. The Kamloops Chamber, we have 650 members, all of which are small, medium, large businesses. We have over 80 not-for-profits. And the way we conduct business in every industry has essentially changed, and it changed almost overnight. Some people knew how to adapt because they had the skill sets on their team, or they were already going this direction anyway. A lot of businesses weren't, especially when you look at our tourism and hospitality, restaurants, those types of companies. It was incredibly hard for them to pivot because, first of all, it's all brand new, so everyone's learning everything on the fly. Second of all, it is significant investment for these companies to adopt these new tools and to take on digital transition. And third, they just don't know how to do it. And with so many options out there, it's so confusing and overwhelming. And so we also found that on top of businesses trying to be resilient and trying to pivot, as everybody likes to say, they were being inundated with government information and inundated by their customers' concerns and inundated by employee constraints. And it was just like everything was happening at once, and it was a nightmare. And it was super stressful times right at the outset of the pandemic. But in that short time, we saw not-for-profits starting to manufacture PPE. We saw some of our distilleries starting to manufacture hand sanitizer. We saw not-for-profits coming together to talk about what are they going to do without event revenue. We saw restaurants making websites, getting take order options like on their website for people to purchase, all within a matter of weeks. That's resiliency. That's that entrepreneurial spirit. And so in a sense, we really focused on the things that mattered.
You've obviously gained a lot of experience since your days as being the Enactus cactus. What would be one piece of advice that you would give to Enactus students today?
I think that everyone is always going to be challenged for time. Time is, I think, everyone's greatest challenge when it comes down to it. And so a piece of advice I would give is to live intentionally and do the things that fulfill you.
Thank you so much for being with us today and for sharing so much great insight into these questions.
Thanks so much for having me.
Again, we want to thank you all for tuning in, and we hope that you enjoyed meeting some of our impressive alumni, learning about their journey, about how Enactus impacted their lives. Thank you once again to RBC Foundation in support of RBC Future Launch for sponsoring this Enactus Canada Alumni Spotlight Series. Enjoy the rest of the Enactus Canada Regional Exposition.